Welcome back to Fully Equipped. J-Well, RB, Uncle Gene. RB's back doing ad reads this week. All's right with the world. Boys, how we doing? It was recently just myself and Uncle Gene manning the pirate ship, as he likes to call it. RB's back from vacation. Didn't look at a laptop, maybe? How you doing,
Very
man?
rarely. I don't think so. I tried very hard not to. I tried to look down a lot more fairways than computer screens. Let's put it that way.
That's a good part of taking time off. And I will say this, not to complain, because I do love this job, but we don't play near enough golf.
I wanted to play so bad.
Yeah.
You know the story. If you want to play golf, don't work in the golf industry. I mean, that's just the dumbest thing in the world.
Well, I know, but
You just I mean, it's a dream job in so many respects, but at the same time, it's rough because you're doing it 8-10 hours a day, and then to go tee it up afterwards, it's just like, oh, you know. I mean, I have an enjoyment factor of the game based on how much I'm working. Like when I'm slacking off, I really like golf. When I'm, pedal to the metal, not so much. Just a little tired of talking about it at the end of the day, much less playing it. So,
They changed the name of it years ago. It used to be called like CPGA, like Canadian PGA, Canadian Professional Golfers Association, and the joke used to be CPGA just stands for can't play golf anymore because you're too busy, and that was kind of like. So it's Golf Canada. I don't believe they don't call it Golf Canada Professional now, but like I still think that was probably one of the funniest things when I used to talk to people. They're like, people you get the question all the time. It's like, oh, how much do you play? And it's like, I play a couple times a week. That's just still pretty good. Like that's I'm not unthankful for that by any means, but yeah, I remember the first time when I was a kid, someone told me that and they were like, oh no, I'm a CPGA pro. Like you can't play golf anymore. And I said, oh, that's very funny actually. So yeah, I always think of that, but I do enjoy. Playing, and I played with some friends, and that's what I did with my time off. So
yeah, well, it's good that you were able to get some golf in, because man, I gotta tell you, as we record this podcast, it is July 30th, and I don't know about URB, but this is about the time of the year where I start to get a little twitchy because I know what's coming. It's just like a non-stop onslaught of equipment releases. And it starts this week. Oh, by the way, we've got Titleist launching GT. We had TaylorMade launching their new P7CB and the P770s. And then a tease to the new PXG Gen 7. That is a lot of gear in the month of July. And we've talked about this before. The gear cadence has changed. It used to be years ago, back before even I was in the industry. It was, Gene, you probably remember this. PGA show used to be the place for launching equipment. I mean, that was where everybody just dropped the new wares, and it was the place where you figured out what was going on. I mean, you didn't get any real advanced release at that point.
Yeah, the fall is a new phenomena, probably in the last, I don't know, maybe 10 years or so. If it's longer than that, I've just forgotten it. But it seems like it's a pretty new. I remember, no joke, I remember testing, and these are products for companies that are now majors, testing like January 15th prototypes for January 24th release at the PGA show. I mean, we're talking rolling right up, to the back of the convention center and delivering product. It was, but the industry was a lot smaller back then. It was a lot more nimble. What fascinates me about this now, and you guys know this, they have to have this in the can a year ago from right now. And they had to start planning for that 6-8 months prior to that. So like what's just so mind-boggling to me is kind of really, and this is where I think CEOs and especially heads of research and development really earn their money. And that's, you're putting all your chips down and saying, this is the way of the future. This is the way, like TaylorMade, for example, saying we're going in on all carbon. And, they had a burn the boat strategy. There was no going back. They didn't hedge the bet. They just said, we're going in on all carbon. And that was a decision that was made long in advance, not knowing what the trends were going to be in the industry and really trying to go out there. And I have a profound respect for that, because that takes visionary type risk, which is wild. Because let's face it, most of these launches are iterative. They're just a gradual improvement, and a lot of them are very safe. And so to see companies do something,
not these. I don't.
I know.
Yeah. I don't think these are very safe. But I would agree with you. I think some of them are, for the most part. I would agree they are iterative.
Now I want to say, speaking of someone who is not iterative, and I know we did not discuss this, but you mentioned it, Gene, and you mentioned the PGA show, and it immediately came to my mind. I think we should acknowledge it because I think it's very important. Is someone in the golf industry, absolute visionary in the golf industry, passed away within this past week, and that is Dick Helmstetter, who was the person behind the Callaway Big Bertha and their that entire push in the late 90s and the early 2000s. Like, that was because of him. He passed away, I believe he was 82. And we mentioned visionary in the PGA show and cycles and equipment and revolutionary stuff. And
that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up.
It literally just came to my mind, and I think we should acknowledge that because you guys talked about it last week, which I did listen to most of it. No, you got to get to listen one way or the other. But talking about Sonortech and how companies like go through these cycles and all like different things, right? Like Callaway started off as we'll call it a relatively small company at the time. Big Bertha and all these innovations were partly because of Mr. Helmstetter, and kind of changed the equipment landscape forever, right? It kind of set off this chain of Callaway and TaylorMade and Ping and all these companies revolutionizing the way that Metalwoods didn't drive the industry, but really changed the way golfers thought about technology and products. So I just, I know we're getting down some other stuff, but I just wanted to acknowledge that because I remember seeing it in the news last week, and I wanted to mention that. So kudos to him, and life well lived. And I think a lot of golfers can definitely be thankful for the innovations that he brought to the industry.
Gene's pulled some stories before about Nick.
I got a great Helmstetter story. So to show you the difference in the industry back then, Helmstetter used to come out and do the testing on his own. So he'd pull out a lawn chair. I'm 25, 26 years old, and he would sit down and he'd just give me a ration of shit for 4 hours. And he'd be like, "You're doing this wrong. You're doing that wrong." And I didn't know what I was doing. And I was just like, "Yes, Mr. Helmstetter. No, Mr. Helmstetter." I was just so freaked out. And this went on for years. But they're like a $4 or $5 million company at the time. And he was the head of product, and he'd show up to testing. No staff or anything. So one day he pulls up in his BMW at the Polo Fields in Del Mar, and he gets out and he goes, "Come here, I want to show you something." And I go to his trunk, and he hands me this thing, and he goes, "This is going to be the Big Bertha." And I swear, I remember looking at it and going, "Gimmicky product, hokey name. I don't give it 6 months." Without all of the marketing and advertising, it just looked like an oversized driving range, because that's what Metalwoods were. They were driving range clubs at that point so that they wouldn't break. And Persimmon was the prestigious clubs. And so I was one of the first people to test the Big Bertha. And it tested decent. It tested a little bit better than the Persimmon. But I think I told the story. There was a company called Slotline, a putter company, that had actually made a plastic head with like a, I don't even know what the insert was.
Like a ceramic or something?
Almost like a ceramic. Can't remember what the insert was, but because it was plastic, they created a perimeter weighted head, and it actually was superior to the Big Bertha. And it just got swamped in the tsunami that was the Big Bertha. I mean, it was out of the marketplace in like 3 or 4 months. But this guy had been testing.
Not to cut you off right there, Gene, but it is interesting how marketing can make or break a product.
100%.
I mean,
I've seen that
crazy.
so many times.
It is crazy how better products have just gotten, like you said, swamped or tsunamied by the marketing machine. Think about Nike with like we talked about last week with the tour accuracy.
Yeah.
You know, they had Tiger. They couldn't figure it out with production, and then Titleist just tsunamis them with the Pro V1. So it is not to cut you off, but it is just so interesting how good products have died just simply because they didn't have the marketing.
Well, and what I've learned in this industry is that marketing rules the world without a doubt. I mean, hands down. I mean, I'll get back to Helm Center in a second, but you got me on another rabbit hole. And that TaylorMade came out with the R7, the first R7, and they wanted me to do a demo at their launch. And they were like, hey, this is going to be a adjustable weight driver. And I had tested that same technology 10 years earlier. And I was like, oh my God, this industry's dead. We're just recycling the same things at this point. And I was like, I remember I was just like,
what the hell are we doing now?
Well, I was so dispirited. I go to the event. We put the weight on the toe, the ball goes to the right, put the weight on the heel, the ball goes to the left on the robot. Hale Irwin was on the other side hitting golf balls. Toulon was, emceeing the whole thing. And then I walked down and they had these giant video screens for the press. And they were talking about vertical gear effect and shot shape and everything. And I'm sitting there watching the presentation and I became a believer. And I was like, oh my God, this is revolutionary technology. And it was all in the art of telling the story. But, back to
so important.
Back to one of the greatest quotes that I've heard was someone once told me the chairman of Revlon once told his sales force, gentlemen, we do not sell lipstick, we sell hope. And that so could be the golf industry right there. And it's just, it's beautiful. So full circle back to Callaway, they sold hope, and Helmstetter was instrumental. And this guy named Greg Stoltz, who figured out how to do it from a casting standpoint, Greg Schmidt, but it was Ely who figured out how to tell the story. And what Ely did that was so brilliant with that club is he took a 9-degree lofted driver or a 10-degree lofted driver and called it a 9-degree. And he took an R flex shaft and called it an S flex shaft. And he defeated the male ego, which always said they had to play a 9-degree S at the time. And they actually ended up playing a 10-degree R. Shazam, they could get the ball in the air. Suddenly, the game was a little bit more enjoyable. And all of the marketing at that point, they had Sir Isaac Newton and they had some technological backup, but it was like, it was kind of an Apple approach. Let us do the tech. You just go out and enjoy yourself. But Helmstetter was an instrumental part of that. And that started Callaway off on their path that they're on now.
So if you ever see an RCH shaft, that's for Richard C. Helmstetter. That's it. So if you ever, any of those people out there looking at old Big Bertha clubs and you see that RCH, and to be honest, I did not know, I didn't realize this until I read his many obituaries that were out there, and I thought, oh crap, that's what that meant. Well, that's pretty darn cool. So anyways, I just wanted to share that and thought it was neat. I had a feeling Gene might have a story about him. So
do you think the marketing, the way that they market, has changed all that much from back in like the 70s and 80s? I mean, yeah, social media, but I mean, do you think it's changed a ton?
Yeah, and when I got in the and here's why. When I got in the industry, I mean, I got in 1990, so I can't really comment. I can comment a little bit about the late 80s, but not really the 70s. But looking at old articles, technology was advancing so much in the first 10 or 15 years that you could get 10 yards or 15 yards more, especially, pre-launch monitors where, setup was critical and nobody really kind of understood the physics. Well, the engineers did, but the general public and the marketing, there wasn't an industry awareness. You could get these massive gains. And so I would test, and you'd have a low spinning ball with a low launching head versus a high spinning ball with a high launching head, and you'd have a 20-yard difference in distance, and you could make those claims, and those claims were being made, and those claims were valid because their products were so different. As we've improved over the years, and as we've stated on this pod, man, everything's bunched together. But that's a good thing for the consumers because everything's really good. It's a little different in its characteristics that we highlight and we mine deep and don't just say, oh, wow, that felt really good, or man, I'm going to give that thing a gold star. We go into the actual technical parts to give you the best game, to give you the best options for your game because it's a data-driven business. But back then it wasn't. And so claims were a lot bigger and bolder. There was a lot more separation between products. And so it was more of the Wild West, and it was kind of fun because of that. And you still had what I call like garage manufacturers that were coming out that would have a product, have a hit, and then they could take off, like Sonar Tech, like Olimar, these smaller companies that had a chance to grow. You don't really see that as much anymore because it's a mature industry and it requires an insane amount of money to get into this business.
Well, one company that's been in this business for a very long time and is able to not just make claims, but really back them up thanks to testing is our friends at Golf Pride. And in case you didn't know, Fully Equipped is brought to you by our great friends over at Golf Pride. And what they want you to own is the moment of impact, because it is the most crucial point when you are making the stroke and you are rolling the golf ball and you are putting on the green. And one way to better control that moment of impact is with a reverse taper grip. Testing has proven that a reverse taper grip from Golf Pride, which, as the name suggests, literally flips the script on a putter grip and has a smaller top hand and a bigger lower hand. What it does is it helps to close the club face and keep a more square club face at impact to get the ball rolling online more often so you can feel confident over every single putt. Now, if you're curious about the reverse taper, it comes in 3 different shapes and 2 different sizes. There is the round, the pistol, and the flat. The round, universally popular for all different types of putting styles. There's the pistol for people who like to really make sure that they are right hand low for right-handed golfers and like to really control the stroke with that top hand. And then there's the flat, which is a little bit different in the fact that it works more for golfers who like to do more palm-to-palm style. And again, all 3 of those options come in a medium and a large size. And if you'd like to learn more about the reverse taper grip, as well as Golf Pride's entire selection of full swing grips, including, which I believe there are still some available right now, is the Steph Curry underrated collaboration, which you can go find on their site as well. Head over to golfpride.com to learn more about all of their full swing grips and the reverse taper. So thanks to them for sponsoring the podcast.
Well, I guess we should probably talk about some of the new gear, right? I did enjoy that conversation, though. I think it's fun and also interesting to go back and see where the industry's come, and looking at how launches have changed. And as we mentioned, this is a big week for 3 manufacturers. And just as a tease, there are some more launches coming in like less than 2 weeks, and one of them's pretty significant. So again, it just goes to show you how the cadence have changed. It's no longer, I can even remember when releases were pretty much set for towards the end of the year, maybe October. You might get a few things, but mostly December, January, and then maybe just a couple of smaller releases during the year. But man, it's just completely changed. And I mean, what do we want to kick it off with? Dealer's choice.
Let's talk GT. Because that came out. Yeah, it feels like months ago now. In our like weird little space, we're like, okay, that was cool. We talked about that a while ago, but now like we can actually share like a lot of the tech behind it. I know we've got an interview coming up as well, which is really exciting. So you don't want to get like too deep into it, but I think what
Do we want to talk about the coolest piece? Like some really cool, and excuse my French, some really cool shit. Like this driver, guys, I know Gene hasn't tested it yet, which then makes me wonder if I want to go like deep on what's going on. But I guess we should. The coolest piece of tech comes with a really fun story, and as RB alluded to, we have Stephanie Latrell, who's Titleist director of Metalwood development on, and I had a chance to go out to TPI and interview her about GT. But she tells a story about GT. So if you were to look at this driver, and you're going to see pictures of it posted all over social media, you're going to look at that thing from the address position, and you're going to think, damn, that thing looks like every other Titleist driver that they've released going back to maybe TS. I mean, the shaping of it has changed a little bit, but they look very similar from the address position. And I'm here to tell you, friends, that while it may look similar, there is a lot going on with this driver. So, as Gene mentioned, TaylorMade sunset basically sunset titanium and went to this all carbon construction a few years back when they introduced Stealth. Titleist is not doing that, but they are introducing a new crown construction that they're calling seamless thermoform crown. And again, this is why I let Stephanie Latrell do it, because I don't want to go too deep on this. But it has material. And RB, did you get a chance to see this new proprietary matrix polymer?
I did. So when you went to TPI, I went to Titleist Canada. They had the full kit. I got the Coles. I didn't say I got the Coles Notes version. I didn't get to talk to the R&D team, but shout out to my friend Ryan Andrews, a fellow Ryan in the industry, Canadian Ryan as well, who took me through this process as well as my fitter. And the thing that was really cool about it was, I said, and I had an inkling because I had heard from some people that they were going to some form of carbon fiber for their crown. And what makes it so unique is, as you pointed out, the presentation includes this like piece of this material. Now it's not formed to the shape of a driver. It was just this like sheet of material. It wasn't that big. It was like 4 inches by 2 inches or something.
Yeah.
But when you think of carbon fiber, if you've ever held the crown of any number of drivers and you drop it, it kind of it sounds like carbon fiber, right? Like it
sounds kind of thuddy,
It's thuddy. The material kind of absorbs a lot of vibration and just emits like a different type of vibration, which creates sound. And Titleist drivers, they know who they're fitting. They know who their market is in theory, right? I mean, that they've always been very targeted in the play, what a player wants. They focus so much of it on feedback, and they said that was like a huge part of what they're. I'm really curious. I haven't listened to this conversation with Stephanie, so I'm really curious to like listen to this once we stop talking eventually. And but the idea
it's a good conversation.
They could fine tune the acoustics of this material to get it to sound like. So when as part of the presentation,
talk about what it sounded like when you
drop it on a table, and it sounds like metal. It sounds like you're dropping a thin sheet of metal.
Trippy.
And I was like,
it's really trippy.
I think honestly, I was standing with Ryan, and I think I might have dropped it a dozen times.
Yeah.
I was like, this is the coolest thing. And I just kept like hitting it off stuff, and I bounce it off things. And I was like, this is pretty sweet. They should make credit cards out of this. Like, this is kind of cool. So
it's really cool.
Like, to me, the way that they've done this, and when you think about, especially as well, like if you look at it, there are no seams in this driver. There's others. Look, you can look at other drivers. There are seams. It's just the way that they designed it. They want you to see it. Titleist wants you to like. It's kind of like I think of it, and a GT. It's like whatever. It's a good name, but it's kind of like a car, right? Like you see a lot of different Porsche models, and as someone who's not like a big car guy, I don't know which one is like the super high horsepower one, and I don't know which one is like the base model, and I don't care. Maybe that's great for Porsche because they could just sell a bunch of them and people don't really. But car people know, and so like to me, the GT is like this like hidden horsepower thing in this driver because it doesn't look like there's anything going on But under the hood,
they have a team
there's a crap ton going on.
Yeah, they have a team that just does the paint on this, and then they buff it out so that there is no seam. And here's the funny thing: so when I saw these for the very first time when I was at Muirfield for the Memorial, and I was trying to figure out like what the heck was going on, I looked in the sole, and I'm like, man, it looks like there's maybe a little bit more carbon. Maybe they're getting a little bit of weight savings there. Well, that carbon that you see in the sole is where it wraps. So the PMP goes from the top and wraps down into the sole. It is not just a single piece of PMP.
It's not flat. No, it has to go around the shell. So it's pretty cool. And it saves weight.
Yeah.
And that,
but it also makes the driver sound like a Titleist driver. Like, did you notice any differences in sound? I did not. It sounded exactly like TSR.
So I don't know if you brought yours or not, but I did. So when I went to my fitting, I was joking, and I told those guys I was going to have a surprise, and one of the things I brought was donuts. But the other thing was...
Oh, that was talked about at TPI, by the way. The guys loved the donuts. I saw the text from them. They sent a picture to Josh Talge.
So I brought a 975D, which I picked up like 35 yards with, or 40. Well, at least I think it was. I got numbers upstairs. It was insane. But I picked a whole crap ton of yards up with a 975D, and then I picked up obviously more yards. I brought a 983E, which is one of my favorite drivers of all time. Which, if you still crack it off the screws, it goes pretty good. You don't get the same ball speed, but it still goes pretty good. And then I brought my R. So I brought the R. And I hit it, and I know I hit it really good. And then I hit the thing, and I said, this sounds different. Like, I'm not saying, I said, is there some carbon going on here? I know you're going to give me the presentation, but it sounds different. I'm going to say that there's probably some carbon going on in here. So, like, they didn't, I know and that's why they told me not to tell you when he talked about my fitting. But
I also heard that too.
So there's like, I think their adoption of this and the way that they've adopted it is very Titleist. Right, they were one of the last companies to adopt a adjustable hosel driver, but they've kept that adjustable hosel basically exactly the same. Besides the fact that they've continued to shave weight off it to like help with MOI and all this stuff. So the fact that they've gone to this now, and the adoption rate on tour, which we've seen, which has been extensive. Players like Patrick Cantlay, who is, technically a free agent, but plays a lot of Titleist gear, switched to it almost immediately, and he has used the TS driver. Like, he never even switched to like the TSI or the TSR.
Yeah.
And a lot of players have switched to this thing.
Yep.
I think goes to show that there is this larger performance jump because of this. And I switched drivers. I don't know which driver you got fit for. I went from a TSR3 to a GT4.
I ended up in the GT3.
So, like, again, I think what they've done here is really cool. And I think, again, I'll let Stephanie handle all the tech talk because she's going to be way better than me. But I think for those, if you have a TSR, you're going to see a gain. Whether that gain, as I've said to many people who've already asked me the question, whether that gain is worth it to you, that's up to you and your wallet and your fitter and all that stuff and a launch monitor. But if you have not looked at a Titleist product in a while and you're very curious to try a Titleist driver, there is more forgiveness. There is more ball speed. It's proven. I can't wait for Gene to get these things on the robot. That, like, it's there.
Yeah,
it's there.
TSR was really good. This is really good. We sort of discussed some of the improvements that we saw. I mentioned the like just knuckly ball that dropped out of the air that sometimes was like 1,000 RPM spin. And that one was like 2,000. Its spin rates were so tight, and I was hitting it all over the face too. And some of them were on purpose, but a lot of them were not. Like a lot of golfers out there. So yeah, it is a really good product. If you need a reason to stay around for the Stephanie Latrell interview, she has a story about when they first showed these drivers to the guys out on tour. It is hilarious. So hang around for that. All right, we got more products. We have the interview. We're running up against time. We don't really have a time, but we try to keep it tight around here, and we never do a good job with that.
No, we don't.
No.
We're going to tease the one of the...
You're telling them lies now. We never...
TaylorMade stuff's got some cool stuff going on.
What are you talking about? Keep
we're going to save... We'll save...
You're the most loosey-goosey, just haywires around. Sorry.
We have a producer. We don't have a producer. We have a producer.
I hadn't talked in a while. Thought I'd just jump in there.
we'll look. PXG's got Gen 7.
Yeah.
They teased it this week. Stay tuned. We're gonna have a lot of cool stuff in relation to like all of their products coming up. But trust me, they're pretty cool stuff. They got some pretty cool stuff going on.
RB's been raving about them. I am very interested. As Poppy would say, I'm very intrigued. So the TaylorMade, I'm going to save for next week because we already have an interview for this week. But I had a chance to chat with Matt Bovey, who oversees product creation for irons at TaylorMade, and he and I went pretty deep on the new P7 CB. You've seen it in Rory's bag, Colin's bag. Colin actually added a full set at the Scottish Open. Tommy Fleetwood's got a 3-wood in the bag, 3-iron in the bag. It had, I mean, to RB's point about like immediate tour adoption for GT, the P7 CB is seeing the exact same thing. I guess we could probably save a little bit more of the deeper dive on those. Why don't we just do that? We'll save for next week.
Let's not touch on tech, but can we talk about looks?
Looks, I mean, it's rack forged.
Okay. I don't know if Bovey says it in the interview again. He did. I get to play like whatever. I get to play like complete and utter idiot here, and I don't know what's going on because I was not there for this. But they look like the old rack forged. They look pretty sick, and I think the one thing as well is, and they've admitted this, and they talked about it. I'm really curious to hear the full conversation. But when I got fit 2 years ago now. And I just got some 770 coppers this last, I guess, a couple of months ago now. And they're awesome. They're so much fun to play with. They look fantastic and they feel really good. But there's like this, to that iron and the MC, there's a gap. And I think a lot of golfers are going to like the fact that this is going to be that option where there's, it offers a forged golf club, but it's a little bit bigger. There's a little less offset. Because the MC, to be fair, and our robot testing proved it, it's not a super forgiving golf club. It was probably more in line with the blade than it would be. It probably could have been separated a little bit more. And, again, I'm not gonna blow the whistle on the tech stuff because I think there's a lot of cool stuff here that I know Matt's gonna talk about next week, and we got some stuff coming out about it. But super, super impressed with this iron. I messaged one of the engineers and I was like, "You guys hiding some stuff in there?" And he's like, "Yep." I thought that's pretty sweet. And I think it's a great looking iron. And I think similar to the point of the tour adoption with the GT, that to me is and you see it all the time, John. And like that, when a product comes out and people kind of like, okay, cool. Like it's fine. And like, some people kind of like put it in their bag, but when something comes out and it like immediately gets in like not just one, not just two players, because they worked with those specific two players and it got into someone's bag. When it just like starts to like weave its way into players' bags so fast, that to me is like, well, they've got something really big here. So,
yeah, and I think that is definitely a story there. I mean, we talk a lot about tour adoption and tour changes, but yeah, it's not just another better player iron. Let's just put it that way. But we'll save a little bit more of what makes it. I mean, people are going to know by that point anyway. But they won't have the interview with Bovey. So,
but you know what the thing is, and I should mention this before we get to the interview with Stephanie, which I'm not at the moment, but when this does come out, and Mark, our great producer, I almost call him serial killer. When Mark gets this out, I'm very excited to actually listen to it myself because I'm super curious what she has to say. But for those who are looking to get these when they do come out, where you can get them? You can head right over to fairwayjockey.com. They offer the world's most extensive collection of aftermarket shafts and custom equipment built to tour level specifications. And not only that, they offer the lowest prices on custom built clubs, up to 20% less than the average nationwide club fitter quote. And if you use the code fully equipped, that is FULLYEQUIPPED, although I trust all of our listeners can spell fully equipped without putting a space in between it, you can take an extra 10% off of your purchase by using that promo code. So if you are looking for a Titleist GT driver, some new TaylorMade irons, or a couple weeks from now, looking for maybe some PXG irons we've kind of teased about, you can head over to fairwayjockey.com to find it all there. And remember, use code fully equipped to save an extra 10% off.
There we go. All right. Well, as we've teased multiple times already, we had the opportunity to chat with Stephanie Latrell, who's Titleist Director of Metalwood Development. We talked all things GT. And oh, by the way, we've mentioned the driver. There's also a fairway that has the new PMP. So if you're excited about the driver, get pumped for the fairways. We get into development, a little bit about the future of driver design and how tour pros help shape GT. Enjoy the interview. Stephanie, how are you?
I'm well, Jonathan. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. We're here out at TPI. This is one of my favorite spots. I know there's a little bit of construction going on right now, but it's always been a big ballpark, but this place definitely feels a bit more cavernous nowadays with more space to
I completely agree. I mean, you look out back that way now, and it just looks like it goes on and on.
Yeah.
Have you had a chance to play the short course yet?
I have not.
All right, next time, right?
Next time. I didn't even know that the short course was ready, so now I'm feeling like I probably should miss my plane flight to hang around for a bit longer. I want to get into GT, but before we do that, I want you to tell me, like, what's your origin story? How did you end up in the golf industry?
Well, a little bit of background. I come from a golfing family. I was probably the last one to take up the game, a little bit of a holdout. I'm always amazed when I see small kids playing golf. It requires so much patience, but game definitely hooked me at one point in time in the high school age. And then I was always gifted at science and math. And so I looked at what careers would offer me the opportunity to still be around the game of golf and yet utilize my science and math background, and I figured out that engineers get to design golf equipment. And so went to the University of Michigan, walked on and played golf there and studied mechanical engineering, and after graduation came to California, and I've been working in the golf industry ever since.
Do you ever think that you'd be in a position where you're getting to lead a design team as you're crafting golf clubs?
Ultimately, that was the goal, was to be not necessarily leading the team, but to be designing and developing equipment that would not only help myself play better golf, but find all golfers have more enjoyment playing the game that I love so much.
I know you're Wolverine. I saw you out at Memorial. Somebody told me that was your first time to Columbus.
That was my first time to Columbus, yeah.
Which is just mind blowing because I know Michigan and Ohio State have such a
big rivalry.
Man, it is. But what was it like to be behind enemy lines in Columbus that week at Jack's place?
Did anyone tell you my milkshake story from Memorial?
No.
So they're probably their most famous flavor there is the Buckeye.
The Buckeye. Oh, yeah.
And I'm more than willing to eat a Buckeye, and so I was in the clubhouse and I ordered it up, and I waited until they were about to hand it to me, and they were asking me where I was from and what I do, and I said, "Oh, and go blue," and they just looked at me with shock, and I was like, "Thank God they would have spit in it, right?"
Yeah, I was going to say, oh my goodness, it is a really good, but the name Buckeye attached to milkshake.
I mean, chocolate and peanut butter, it's kind of hard to go wrong.
Yeah.
Highly recommend milkshakes at the Memorial.
Man, they are amazing. What was that week like for you when you finally get to see a product? I mean, you've been in the design bunker for so long on GT, but what's it like when you're finally able to get out there on tour in a setting like that? I know you did some testing behind the scenes with players, but to finally get it out there at a tour event. Yeah,
there's always this buildup, that anticipation, that there's that nervous energy, but we had done a huge amount of testing with GT through the development phases, and also had some exposure to testing it with some of our tour staff players, and so we felt confident with what we were going to the tee with. But it's a signature event. It's the week before a major championship at US Open. There's always that nerves. So being able to witness the players, see Billy Horschel, who you got to see as well, have a great experience with GT, saw the speed, saw the consistency that we expected out of it, and just that momentum continued to build. So it was exciting, but always, I like to say, you build this cake, and this is like the frosting on the cake of being able to get there and witness the players having such success.
I know drivers in particular, tour pros, even tour pros who are completely dialed in with their products. New driver is something that gets everybody excited. But I had heard that during the initial shoots, guys were like geeking out on another level. Have you personally seen pros this excited about a new driver product since you've been a Titleist?
I think this one has an energy to it that we really haven't seen before. And I'm quite proud of that for the team, because I know the effort and the innovation and the work and the years that they've worked to be able to deliver these new technologies. And so to see the player response and to see the joy that they have and the excitement and just the cross promotion that's happening within our players and our staff, that they're like, have you hit the new driver? You have to hit the new driver. Here's what I saw. Did you see that? That type of, you can't buy that, right? In terms of being able to build off from that in the energy that we have amongst our team and our staff as well.
What's been the kind of the general consensus from the pros that you've kind of been able to kind of hang there? You mentioned Billy Horschel, some of the other pros that you've been able to talk to and get feedback from. What are the things that they're seeing kind of across the board, regardless of the product, whether it's GT2, 3, or 4 that they're hitting?
Yeah, the main themes that we've seen from a performance perspective, I've been, had the pleasure of being at Memorial for the PGA Tour launch, then at LPGA at the Meyer, and then went to KLM and helped launch at the DP World Tour. And consistently, we're seeing with the drivers greater ball speed, greater club speed, and relatively better launch and spin consistency as well. And ultimately what that has led to is that their longest drives are long, but also they're seeing better distance, what I call distance dispersion. So their shortest drives are being pulled closer to their longest drives, and so they're finding more distance consistency as well.
Yeah. So let's go back to TS. Like, that was a big moment for Titleist, Tile Speed Project. That was really trying to find ways to get more aggressive about speed. This driver has a different name. We've gone from TS to TSI to TSR, GT, and I would say it's pretty aggressive in what the GT means. Why did Titleist feel like now was the time to shift away from that TS name and go to something different?
Well, the GT, it stands for generational technology. And
it is pretty aggressive.
Those are some big shoes to fill, for sure.
Yeah.
But when we think about GT and just that connotation of speed, right? That unlocking of speed and all of the key technologies that have built into this platform. We've talked often before about our strategy as a Metalwoods team, and R&D is about balance, and it's how do we not elevate one parameter at the detriment of another parameter, but how do we take it all to another level? And GT truly built upon that. Started with club head speed and aerodynamics, built into ball speed through center of gravity position, incredible launch and spin consistency through CG and inertia, and then having best-in-class fitting technologies to pair with that. So all of that in combination and leveraging new constructions to unlock that performance, really, it absolutely is generational for us.
Yeah. So everybody sees the final product when it comes to market, but they don't know what really goes into designing a lot of these products. When did you start? And I don't know how exactly I want you to show this, because it is so incredible, but how far back does GT go when you started designing some of these groundbreaking technologies?
I would say the technology in kind of formative stages really started about probably 6 years ago. Okay. We knew eventually we would have to move into a multi-material construction, really to be able to take performance to new levels. But there were a lot of boxes that we wanted to be able to check as an engineering and R&D group to be able to deliver something that we felt was authentically Titleist in that way, that delivered upon a product that not only performed, but it looked, sounded, and felt like a Titleist. And so it started with raw material. So we call this our proprietary matrix polymer. It's PMP. This is a new form of carbon that hasn't been used in golf before in this way. And so,
what has it been used in before?
It's been used in aerospace and automotive industries, but the ability for us to take this carbon, which is now impregnated with an engineering polymer, it allows us to create sound frequencies that allow us to tune better for the acoustics of the driver and really hit that sweet spot in terms of Titleist preferred sound and feel.
Yeah. What was your first reaction when you heard the sound of that material? Because it is so distinct.
Yeah. that metallic nature. I remember Dan Stone, who was our SVP for many years, he walked in and he dropped this on a table in my office, and I was like, what is that? Yeah. And he said, this is the future, and this is what we're going to be able to do. And so through that, it required a lot of engineering resources for us to figure out, how do you make a better driver using this material? And GT is the culmination of that.
So remember looking at the drivers at Memorial, and the fun thing that I like about like initial tour launch is you don't know what's going on. We as journalists haven't been briefed on the products, so we're trying to make our own guesses on what's going on. And you're looking at the bottom of the sole, and it's like, maybe there's a little bit more carbon here. That could there's a weight savings benefit there. But I got to be honest, it's been a while since I've been this shocked and surprised about what's going on with this driver, because when you look at it at address, it looks like
you had seen this,
right?
Yeah,
exactly. You see it. It's a very traditional Titleist driver. You look at the crown and you say, okay, it's got to be the same construction as the past, and you've got an ATI 425 face, and okay, what's really going on here? But there's a lot more going on in this crown than what you've had in the past.
I think I had a good gotcha moment today when I did that.
You definitely got me, for sure. And I had no idea that there was a section of this driver crown. That's definitely not what you would expect.
Right. So this material and the way that this driver is constructed is helping us to unlock that performance. So by being able to section out this portion and replace it with the PMP, we've been able to distribute the mass more effectively. It's allowed us to do some different things shaping-wise that are helping us aerodynamically, and it really was a key for us. But as you mentioned, you had no idea it was happening, and that's one of the things we took on as an engineering challenge early in the development, was to say, how do we make this look the way that our players would prefer to see a Titleist driver continue to look? And it led us down a path of a seamless construction. And I think the proof is in the pudding in that. And when we did some early prototype testing with Jordan and Justin, I was showing them these parts and demonstrating it to it. And I could somewhat see a little look of concern in their eyes of like,
I don't want things to change too much.
Is this what my driver is going to look like? And then we opened the drawer on the tour truck and pulled out the head, and they were like, oh, thank God. Like, this is amazing. And so the fact that really the emphasis here is on, we want to build a driver that in the address position builds player confidence, that there's nothing competing for your eye, that when you set it down behind the golf ball, all that you feel is that you're going to go and hit bombs with it.
Yeah. So because that section, we've seen this before from other manufacturers, but never quite like this where it's concealed. What's the process, or what was that process like to get it to a point where you all said, all right, everybody's giving this a thumbs up and we can bring this to retail?
Yeah, I think ultimately what it comes down to is great engineering process control and manufacturing control with our suppliers. So working through that, we have an amazing team of engineers. Jorgen Meister heads up our production engineering group, and he worked with them and our suppliers to be able to really develop this process, to be able to handcraft it. Essentially, every single one of these parts is hand touched, and I like to equate it, and I shared this with you earlier, if you're going to have your classic Chevy refurbished, right? And so that aspect of, after the crown is bonded to the head, being able to go back in and fill that seam, hand work it down to a premium finish, and then apply our piano black paint. And so every single part has a very consistent look and finish because of that.
You mentioned there's a very specific team that gets their hands on these drivers to be able to do that process. It is amazing though, because I look at it and I think that it would take a very long time to be able to perfect that, especially when you're trying to mass produce drivers. But you, as you said, they're pretty efficient in how quickly they
learn their skill for sure, and they demonstrate it well with these drivers.
Yeah. One of the things that I thought was interesting when you were kind of taking me through the initial deep dive on GT was you started with the aerodynamics, which, if I think about it, the aerodynamics tend to get lost in the design of drivers because it's not sexy. It's not a new face technology or new crown technology, but it plays such an important role. But I heard you talk about it at the outset. Like you kind of started with the aerodynamics. Is that typically the way that you all design drivers? Do you start with kind of the aerodynamics and work your way in towards the other materials, or was this sort of a new way of approaching the driver design?
I would say it's new in that we have not had our lead aerodynamicist Steve Ogg with us for that many years, and so we're still continuing to learn from his research. And in his research, one of the things is that the form of that head shape and our ability to engineer the ability for the wind to stay connected to the crown and the sole, that aspect comes purely from the external shaping of the head. And we can study that and we can iterate on it, and he can help us to deliver shapes that are very aerodynamic. But then we have to take those shapes and we have to say, well, how do we make a great performing driver out of that shape? And that was a bit of the conundrum with GT, which is why it necessitated unlocking the performance with the seamless thermoform crown construction.
Yeah. And as you were showing me, the crown and the sole, kind of where they meet, it's a lot more uniform than it was in the past, and that's where you're able to get a lot more of the efficiencies with the drag over the crown.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, drivers in general, they act as wind sails, right? As they're moving through the air, and in that this is going to interrupt and catch a lot of air. So our studies have focused a lot on curvature of the head. And so being able to create a connected flow to the crown and the sole, not have turbulence and separation earlier up in the front, that's allowing us to move the head through the air faster, minimize drag, and increase club head speed for all players.
Yeah. So with the new crown construction and having the multi-material construction, how does that change like the overall technologies that you have inside each driver? Because I did notice like the weight track on the 3 was moved, like just with these drivers, starting with maybe with the 2, kind of how has that changed the way that the driver performs?
Yeah, well, with the 2, ultimately this driver and its position in the lineup is it needs to be our most stable, most forgiving product, but we also wanted to make it fast. And so the combination of the aerodynamics and repositioning our center of gravity in all of the GT models, we've moved them slightly lower and more forward. And we like to talk about that the goal of doing that is to align center of gravity more with neutral axis. And when we talk about neutral axis, it's that perpendicular plane through face center.
Right.
Anytime you can move CG to be close to that, essentially you're unlocking more ball speed by aligning center of mass behind center of max deflection on the face. And you're also producing a trajectory that will be higher launch and lower spin. So in doing that, ultimately you lead to more carry distance and more total distance out of the product. And so GT2 is kind of that best combination of high launch, low spin, max stability in a package. And so the technology is allowing us to do that by distributing the mass. We've still got weight adjustability in the back with the flat weight. But as we move into the 3, as you mentioned, we repositioned our track system from TSR3 all the way into the front portion of the head. And we kind of showcase that by showing you the internals of the head. But the split mass construction that we have going on is essentially that we're isolating a large amount of mass low and forward and a large amount of mass in the aft portion of the head. And that combination effect, that balancing, is what's giving us great CG properties, but also great inertial stability. And as we thought about how do we build up from TSR3, how do we make an even better tour driver, because TSR3 has been globally renowned as the most played tour driver, we really had to be aggressive in this, in that we had to think about how do we make it faster and how do we make it have better spin to launch ratios. And so repositioning the track has allowed us to do that while maintaining great stability. Still having heel toe CG adjustability helps players to unlock the performance. You can use that to align CG more with your impact location. You can also use it to take one side of the golf course, how to play and really free yourself up to swing more aggressively. And I think you saw that a little bit in your fitting.
Sounds like me.
Yeah. And then the 4, really its position in our lineup is to be that ultra low spin product for that player that needs aggressive spin reduction. That's why we've maintained the 4 aft CG adjustability. So with the concentrated mass low and forward in this head, it really is that aggressive spin killer for us. But now I think it's even more unique with how we've repositioned the CGs on the 2 and the 3. The 4, if you go and you flip that heavy weight to the aft, now it kind of lands into what I'd call a GT 2.5. And that really brings a lot of versatility to that product. So for someone that needs launch and spin between a 2 and a 3, you have that option now in the 4.
So one of the things that I noticed right off the bat today when I was testing, it's actually one of the first things that I noticed when I was at Memorial listening to pros test it for the first time out there. I'm so used to hearing guys, and I think a lot of it's just from years of listening to the marketing speak of, oh man, this driver's 5 yards longer, 10 yards longer. And I heard a lot of pros talking about picking up ball speed, but so many of them were highlighting these tighter spin deltas. And what I mean by that is the geometric center face spin in relation to those mislocations. The tighter you can get it, that's when you really start to see meaningful improvements in your game, because you're not seeing those wild misses and the ball staying on the planet. I heard it from those guys, and then I saw it today. I'm a lefty, and I would like to keep everything center line left. I don't want anything right. Anti-right driver, I'll take that all day, but when I get ones that I snipe to the right, it could be anywhere from like 1,100 to like 1,300 or 1,400 RPMs of spin. And today I was seeing 2,000 RPMs of spin on a very similar miss. I mean, I could feel it coming off the face, but you watch the ball hang there. And I just was so impressed by all the improvements in those spin deltas. What is the secret sauce behind this? Because I hear about it, I see it for myself, and then it makes me wonder, like, what's going on here? Why am I able to see spin rates that range between 23 to 2,700, but even on those bad balls, it's still at 2,000?
Really what it comes down to is the combination of our center of gravity placements and the inertial stability of the head. So those two in combination are allowing you to have that exceptional spin and launch stability across the face. Without going into a lot deeper detail on it and letting out all of our secrets,
right.
That combination is really what's helping to deliver, that distance consistency and that bringing it in on the dispersion as well.
So ATI was really a groundbreaking technology for Titleist that opened a lot of doors, but I know you've made some modifications to this. We saw a little bit of a sneak preview with it with TSR, but now it feels like this new design is kind of going across all the different models.
Right, yeah, thanks for highlighting that one as well. So every generation of drivers, we're always trying to consider how do we make it faster. And with TSR3, we had a technology called Speed Ring that we had just really kind of scratched the surface of. And so with 2 more years, we've been able to iterate and understand how do we leverage that type of technology to deliver performance across the entire GT lineup, and how do we use it to make a better GT3 as well. And essentially what Speed Ring is it's a thickened perimeter on the face. And what that does is it creates more local deflection at face center. More local deflection, more compliance, more ball speed at face center. But when you do that, you need to pair it with a really thin VFT pattern, and that builds consistently. And by doing that, you're able to stretch out the consistency and enlarge the sweet spot across the face. So I like to say that Speed Ring and VFT in combination, they deliver fast on fast. They're faster on center, and then they're faster across the face. And we've seen that with all of our tour testing as well. Robotic testing, we can also see that in terms of the ball speed consistency. It's just taking the whole curve and shifting it up across the board.
I've talked to a lot of designers, and one thing I'm always curious about is what's your favorite part of designing these products? Some say that they really just enjoy the chase of being able to find something new that they can implement into a new product, and being in the weeds is great. And others are like, oh, I just love getting to the finish line and seeing the product come to life. What about you?
Yeah.
What do you enjoy most about designing drivers?
I think part of what I have found the most satisfaction with is trying to take all of the performance and bring it up. So it's something that Dan Stone, who was my mentor, instilled in me that, we're Titleist. We can't just check one box. It can't just be fast. It has to be everything. And so that challenge just kind of fuels me in terms of being able to, every generation of product, how do we make it better? Always go forward, never backwards. And that's really the joy that we have as an engineering group, and the team behind me as well, everyone in the R&D team. They're incredibly passionate about what we do. And so that drive to make it better every single time is something that I think just fuels us. And when we see test results that validate that, you definitely feel as though the hard work is paid off.
And I think every manufacturer likes to think that they do something really well, maybe even better than their competitors. What do you think separates Titleist from its peers in the industry when it comes to driver technology?
I think that we pay attention to a lot of the small details, and so trying to take into account the feedback of what golfers really want out of a driver, out of a fairway, out of a hybrid, trying to integrate that feedback and really pay attention to all of those small details, even down to, the laser engraving pattern on the face.
Yeah, we didn't even get to that.
Just, that type of feedback, and how do we help golfers set up behind the golf ball with more confidence? The high contrast face was born out of that type of discussion and technology with our tour reps as well as our consumer testers. And so I think that's one of the things that brings us a lot of joy, is not only does it fly great, but it looks, sounds, and feels great. And any player can set this driver down behind the golf ball and say, I'd like to hit that.
Yeah. All right, last one for you. I'm seeing so many new materials in this driver, and we've seen other materials start to enter this space. Where do you see driver technology going from this point forward? Because it feels like every time, I've said it before, I said, it feels like we're hitting the ceiling for driver technology. Like you can't get that much better because all these new materials and technologies are already out there. But what do you think? Like where do you think driver technology is going?
I think really what it comes down to is, how do we continue to pay attention to what the golfer needs, right? And how do we leverage technologies and materials to further support that? We've got amazing technologies here at TPI for us to test. Our motion capture bay allows us to learn new things every single day. So as engineers, that's always our challenge, is how do we continue to push forward and expand our understanding, right, of the golfer and what will help golfers play better golf. And so I like to say the USGA has obviously created a club equipment box, right? But I love to think about, how do we push at those dark corners of the box, and how do we find more within the boundary conditions of what we are allowed to do? And that's always the challenge and the joy for us.
Yeah. Stephanie, thanks again for the time.
Thanks.
And congrats
I appreciate it,
again
Jonathan.
on the launch of GT.
Thank you. It's going to be a fun one.
Yeah. And that'll do it for episode 250. Yes, 250 of Fully Equipped. Thanks again to Stephanie for the time. I got to mention all the different ways that you can consume our content if you're into gear, and if you're listening to this podcast and you're this far into the interview, or the episode, I should say, then you probably are. Let's start off with something we haven't mentioned in a while. It'd be the Fully Equipped hotline. What the hell happened to the Fully Equipped hotline? One will never know. We are due to answer some voicemails because I took a look at it today, and oh, by the way, there are more questions. So if you want to leave us a gear related or just whatever rant, rave, anything you want to do, give us a call and leave us a voicemail at 602-935-4974. Again, that is 602-935-4974. Guys, you know what we didn't even talk about this week? Damn.
Is this a PS? Is this a bonus part?
No, but I just thought about it because I saw it here. Pac-Man TaylorMade head covers. We didn't even talk about these things.
We'll get to that next week.
Oh, dear God. We need McCormick for that.
What the hell? It's not a swag product. So.
Yeah, no, I know, but that's right in his wheelhouse.
It's most definitely in his wheelhouse.
He's discerning enough to let us know if that's just a mere interloper or if that actually is a competitor to the swag.
It's a legit. Oh, there's a little bit of rumblings about swag, but I'm not in the business of stirring the pot. We can talk about that one offline. Anyway, so you got the Fully Equipped hotline. You can also check us out on YouTube, and if you haven't, please like and subscribe. We are at Fully Equipped Golf on YouTube, also at Fully Equipped Golf on Instagram, and at Fully_Equipped on Twitter. Yes, there are plenty of ways that you can follow along with all the gear goodness that we're providing. Oh, and golf.com. Probably should mention that too. I think that finally does it. Unless I have any more PSSs, I don't think I do. So let's call it an episode. Thanks as always for listening. We'll see you next week.